let me ask you, did Proof exist? And if so, for how long before the sort of like NFT collection itself existed? Or was it started with the intention of launching an NFT collection?
Well, so I was running my last company, and Kevin kept bothering me about this podcast called Modern Finance.
Yep.
And he's like, you should listen to this podcast. Like this Web3 thing is changing the world. And I actually mined Bitcoin in 2012. And so like I understood what cryptocurrency was, but I hadn't learned about Ethereum, like, you know, the actual power of smart contracts. And so I think he said, you should pay attention to this. And Kevin's very good at seeing the future. So I started to pay attention, started to read, and started to listen to the podcast. And so that was called Modern Finance. And then I remember the episode with DC Investor where he explained what an NFT was. And I was like, holy shit, a digital asset with provable ownership on a global database that no one controls. This is literally going to change the world. And, you know, you have those moments where you realize something and you become like this zealot, like almost like you like join a cult. And I was like, oh my God, you know, this is going to change the world. So then as I sold the company, I started to dive in, and then he launched Proof, the podcast, right? Which was about NFTs. And so so I started listening to that. And then he said, hey man, I'm going to launch a collection, and you know, it's going to be called Proof. It's going to be 1,000 people who are passionate about NFTs. And I was like, great, well, I'm going to mint that. And he's like, yeah, you know, I'll hold one back for you. It's okay. And so joined Proof as a member. And then it took over my life because I had sold the company. And so, you know, I didn't have anything else to do. And so I was in Discord all day, and my wife and my kids were like, are you a Discord moderator? What are you doing? And I was like, I guess I am. I don't know.
He's like, honey, I've sold 2 companies. I'm not a Discord mod. I'm a community member.
It was, I mean, that was like cutting from my 12-year-old. He's like, you're a mod? I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, basically. And then I just got so passionate about Proof. I just said to Kevin, I'm like, man, let me help you build this. Like, I've built a bunch of companies. I can help you boot it up, because he was at True Ventures. And so I just leaned in and like put my hand up, and then we started building.
I love that. I love the fact that you, like, when you were telling me that, you know, you were like just in Discord all day, I was like, man, he's a Discord dog just like us, man. He's no different than us. Yeah.
Yep, man. I was on, you know, and like it scrolls. If you don't hold your finger on the phone, it's super annoying. You're like, oh my God, you know.
Yeah. It's, that's really cool. It's really cool, the fact that, like, obviously, you know, you started off at Proof, like, pretty much from like the ground level, just like similar to like anyone else. And I think that's like inspirational for anyone else that does, you know, want to, you know, go up in the ranks, you know, in this space, or like with like their favorite project or team. It's like, if you just kind of start off small and like understand, you know, all the ins and outs, then eventually, you know, you could go up and, you know, be COO of that company. Yep. I think that's kind of the beauty of Web3 also, is just the fact that like the entire playing field is like pretty level. Like, I mean, the fact that, you know, you're spending, you know, an hour out of your day to have a conversation with bozos like Champ and I, like that's that's the beauty of Web3.
It's mutual respect. I mean, it's fun for me too, right? You know, to hang out with you all. We talked about this on the Daily Dose the other day. Like, how do you create opportunities for yourself in Web3 if you want to get in? And we talked a lot about, okay, first it's about building relationships and offering value. Like, if you start building relationships and offering value, you start to build real relationships and friends. And then over time, then karma happens. And then you can put your hand up and they're like, hey, Ryan put in the work. He's offering a lot of value. You know, I don't want to go through some huge interview process. I just want to hire him, you know. Dude. And that's literally how the world works, right?
That is so, I'm so glad you bring that up. I was about to ask you about this. And by the way, you mentioned Daily Dose. We're going to talk about that later. I'm looking forward to that. I would also really quickly like to amend my earlier statement. I made a joke about Ryan selling 2 companies. He sold 3, I'm pretty sure, just so you know if you're listening.
Yeah, it's plenty of companies. You know,
yeah,
stuff.
Anyway, point I was going to make is my lead dev, or my CTO really, and my COO are both people who bought my NFT and said what's up to me in VC, and just essentially were like, hey, I can do this, I can do this. Okay, cool. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And now we work together, and that's the sort of Web3 magic to me, right?
Yep.
And what is really valuable to hear from you, because I know you have such immense business experience, is that sort of the validation that this is like a microcosm of the larger business world, right?
Yep.
And people always talk about, it's not what you know, it's who you know, and it certainly is both. But sometimes what you know and demonstrating that over and over again to the right people and building those relationships can make a huge difference. What I wanted to ask you is, can you talk to me more about that actual proof experience, building this project and turning it into this like behemoth that it is today? And I'm very curious, because proof has been certainly like the inspiration for and almost like a proof of concept of just how valuable simply a network, an exclusive group can be. So how did you go from being a Discord dog to where you are now, and talk to us a little bit about like that experience, right? Because proof is legendary now. It's legendary.
It was wild to be inside of it. But the real power of proof is the community. And that's, community is such a cliche, but here's what I mean by that. So, what we did right, and it was really fun to be a part of this, is to develop trust and communication and transparency and openness between individuals. Like, that's actual community. And so what we did in the Discord, and literally I was like, I think I was the first person in Discord. He invited me first, and I started to, get to know everybody. And then I was just human. Like, when people would come to Discord, I would say, hi, how's it going? Like, tell me about yourself. And then I would hop in VC and say, let's hang out. And I said this, I've been saying this a lot on Twitter recently. Why is Twitter Spaces so special? And it's because we've evolved over, some believe that language first appeared 70,000 years ago, and advanced language arrived 10,000 years ago. So we've been speaking for 10,000 years to each other. And a lot of that is around campfires or small groups or in small buildings. And that's how we build actual relationship, right? And so if you hop in a VC in a Discord, you actually start building a relationship. You hear people's voice. Sometimes they turn on their camera and you're like, oh, you look like this, and you're about this, and then you tell a story, like, and then your kids walk in the room and you start to get to know each other. So that happened in Proof. And I really kind of pushed hard on that and helped do that inside of Proof. And I think it built this trust in Proof that was really special. And that's the magic, right? And then you realize, I've got all these friends now that are across the globe, and they're all interesting. Like, they would turn on their camera and they're having coffee and looking out over, the water in Greece. And you're like, that's cool and interesting. And do you sail? Yeah, I do. Or, and you start to connect. So that's what was happening in the Discord. And then you layer on top, Kevin sprinkled magic on it, because when we launched Grails, like, that was the moment that it really started to go, astronomical, because he had built these relationships with artists, the world's best artists, and he brought them into the Grails 1 project. And so that mechanic created this unbelievable dynamic in the Discord. So the Grails project, for anyone that doesn't know, is very simple. If you're a Proof member, you got the right to mint a Grail. And a Grail, there was 20 artists, and you didn't know who they were. And you got to see the art, but you didn't know who the artist was. You just knew that they were some of the world's best artists. We're talking the best artists, right? So if you pick the right one, you may pick one that's worth 10, 20, 30, 40, 100 ETH, right? And it created this dynamic in the Discord that was hilarious and fun. And it was like this bonkers detective mission. And at that point, I joined the team, right? So we would tease things and have fun, and it just built this real dynamic of connection. And then, we went off to Kevin and Justin, and I'm not a co-founder. Everybody knows that, but I want to be clear about that. But Kevin and Justin are the co-founders, and we went to an offsite in Mexico, and Kevin said, let's make the community bigger. Let's launch a PFP. And so we were throwing around ideas like, well, what is it an animal? What's the animal? And, you know, came up with like bats and chickens and all sorts of stuff. And somebody said owls. And we're like, yeah, owls. So it was just a lot of making sure the community was very tight. And a lot of that is done through VC. A lot of it's done through real connection. And you can't fake it and you can't shortcut it.